Hey, everybody. Welcome to Open Campus. We've got a session right now with me, John Pauler, and Enrique Ruiz. We're going to be talking about Excel and SQL and why they are the Swiss Army knives of analytics. We'll go through basically a lot of the things that any analyst should be able to do with these two tools, including some overview and some demos. Should be a pretty fun session. Before we jump into that, I want to do a very quick run through of all of these other awesome sessions we've got lined up for you throughout the week. So first off, this is part of Open Campus. I think everybody's aware, but over the next 7 days, starting today, you have 100% free access to every course on the Maven Analytics platform. So go to mavenanalytics.io/open-campus, and you'll be able to get more information on that. There, you'll also be able to see all of these sessions we've got over the next 3 days. We've got 4 really solid sessions per day, starting here with Enrique and I. Right after this, we'll have Aaron Perry talking about the fundamentals of Power BI. Then we'll get into Python with Chris Brule. And at the end of today, this might be Chris Dutton or it might be Enrique covering. For anybody who was on the previous session, Chris Dutton is extremely under the weather right now, but we're still trying to twist his arm to get him to keep going. Then tomorrow, we're going to have a day that's all focused on data careers. So we've got a great session on how to break into careers. Then we'll have another session on some of the latest job trends in 2023. If anybody hasn't seen Dustin Scheimeck's data jobs report, I think it's the most comprehensive look at the data jobs market you will ever find. I think he does it better than anybody else, and we've got him presenting that, which is fantastic. Then you'll have Enrique again talking about how to build an amazing project portfolio, which we always tell everybody that is the way that you're going to get employers to pay attention to you. And again, hopefully, Chris, at the end of that day, will be helping you prep for a data interview, understand what to expect and how to look amazing so that if you can get that interview, you will actually get hired. And then finally on Friday, we'll have Chris again talking about some of the common analytics career paths and how you can figure out which path might be right for you based on the things that you love and the things that you don't. Then we'll have Kristen. She's going to be talking about kind of building your own data roadmap. She's an amazing talent that started in analytics. I actually worked with her over a decade ago. She switched into data science and machine learning. She has she's built her own practice, and now she just basically works on data projects that she thinks is fun. And it's just an amazing life that she's built, and she's got so many interesting stories to share. Then we'll have Alice Zhao, who she is a university level professor, and she's also one of the Maven Analytics instructors. She's going to be talking about lessons from helping over 400 students with their data science projects. And then finally, I'll close out the week giving you a step-by-step guide to launching your data career. We'll have this master checklist that you can follow, and we'll dive really deep into some of the topics that we haven't covered in some of these other sessions. So with that, I'll do a quick pitch as to why I think everybody who wants to be in data should absolutely focus on Excel and SQL first. A little biased because that was my path. I spent about 5 years in analytics, just really being an Excel jockey. I went through the path of analyst, senior analyst, analytics manager, director of analytics in about 5 years. And I didn't know SQL. I didn't know Power BI. I was just really good at Excel and applying that to helping businesses optimize their performance. So that I think that's one example of just how Excel can be extremely valuable. And then I'll cover the SQL half of this presentation to talk about sort of taking the next step, getting into bigger data sets, automating things, and where relational databases really can extend an Excel career. But these are 2 of the most widely used and most versatile tools in data. And anybody who's on this call, if you're thinking about picking them up or getting better, it's a good move. And no one better to help you do that than Enrique here. So Enrique, I'll yield the floor to you.
All right, thanks, John. Let me take over the screen sharing here. And I'll start by giving my pitch on why I also think that everyone should, or at least anyone that's aspiring to be an analyst, should think about Excel as the best starting point. So I'll start it off with a slightly, hopefully not too much controversial sentence, which is that Excel is an end-to-end analytics platform in itself. And while that might sound a little bit far-fetched, or that maybe I'm just too much of an Excel fanboy and that's why I'm saying it, but I think the main point is that instead of separating each layer of the typical data analytics or the BI process, which can be thought of as data, then logic, then presentation, what Excel does is might mix them all within the same user interface and ecosystem. So to make my point, consider this comparison, right? You've got your typical BI workflow. You've got your data stored in a MySQL database, maybe. Then maybe you're doing some back-end programming using Python to make some calculations. And then maybe you're using something like Tableau or Power BI to render those calculations in maybe a dashboard or using user-facing visual. So what that does is use those three layers of the process, right? You've got your data layer, you've got your logic layer, which both of those together can be considered as the back end. And then you've got your front end presentation layer, right? Now, consider this modest Excel spreadsheet here. And while this may look a lot simpler, you still have your data layer, right? You've got your revenue and your cost by month. You've got your logic layer. Right now, we're just using a very simple formula to calculate profit based on that revenue and cost. And then you've got your presentation layer, right? You're rendering those profits in a table, and then you are visualizing them using a line chart. So when you look at it this way, you'll notice that Excel blends both the back and the front end together in a very friendly user interface that lets you kind of learn about all of these end-to-end tools within the same tool. So that's why I think everyone should start with Excel, because it's a great starting point for then learning all these other tools, right? I'm not trying to say or claim that Excel is the only tool you should use for this, or the right tool. Most of the time it isn't. There's a reason why we're talking about SQL in this session as well. There's a reason why we teach Python and we teach Tableau and we teach Power BI as well. But I think that Excel is just the perfect starting point because it blends all of these kind of data analysis fields together within the same platform. So my point here is, instead of just trying to lean you to just learn Excel, mostly to open your eyes to the possibilities and the creativity that Excel allows you to kind of start with in your data journey. So if this got you interested a little bit in Excel, then here is my suggested Excel learning roadmap. First, learn to manipulate data using formulas and functions. That's always going to be key. It's why we always have people take our or Chris's formulas and functions course first. From there, learn to perform exploratory data analysis using pivot tables, and then learn to visualize that data using charts and graphs. Now, here's some of my suggestions on the best formulas, the best things to learn when talking about pivot tables, and the best charts to use. But I think the best way to pay this off is to really just do a quick demo in Excel where I can show you how to do all of this, and we'll build a very simple but quick project. So let me jump over there. And I might have to start sharing again. Are you seeing my Excel work quick, John? All right,
no, still. So yeah. So I think I can kill this feed for you. Yeah, and then you can share another one. Yep.
All right. So I think you should be seeing my Excel work now. This is a small kind of sample data set from what is our data playground actually on our site. It's Maven Toys. You'll see that we've got different sales for different products. And then we've got a small little dimension table here with the different product names. So I'm going to start by just creating some formulas to make some calculated columns here. So we can maybe start by adding one here, maybe pull the weekday from our date so that we can use the weekday function, point at our date, and then maybe have it, return the weekdays from Monday being 1 to Sunday being 7. Now, for anyone that's worked with Excel before and kind of built formulas with dates, you might run into this common, not an error, but what appears to be an error, since it looks like we're getting a weird value here. That's just the formatting. If you pull it back to general, then you'll see that we've got our weekday of 7. This is actually a Sunday. Apply this down. And then maybe we want to create a logical function. Maybe we want to see the day type here. So is this a weekday? Is it a weekend? Is it a weekend? Maybe we're interested in finding any trends there. So if this weekday is greater than or equal to a 6, then that means it's the weekend, right? Otherwise, it's a weekday. Close that out. That's the weekend. Apply it down. And you'll notice that we've got our product ID here, and we've got our different products with the product name, category, and price. So maybe we want to bring over this information to our sales table. So let me create those 3 columns here. I'll insert one, and I can press F4 twice to repeat the action. And let me just copy these titles over. So what we can do to bring these over is use the XLOOKUP function, which is the newer version of VLOOKUP, which you may have noticed, which you may have heard of. It's kind of an infamous Excel function. So we're trying to look for this product ID within our product table. So we're going to find it here. And then we want to return the product name for that product ID. And if I'm careful with my reference types here, I want to apply my formula to the right. So then I bring over my category and then my price. So I'm always going to be looking for my product IDs in column A. Let me fix that. And then my product ID here is always going to be in column E. So I'll fix column E as well, but I'll leave the row relative so I can apply it down. Press enter. We've got our product name, category, and price. Apply it down, and voila. And we can even calculate revenue here. Just multiply price by the units, apply it down, and maybe just format this as a currency. So those are some key formulas and functions. We've got some date functions, some lookup functions, and some logical functions. Now let's go ahead and add a pivot table to summarize this data somehow, because we need to gather some insights. So now that we've got the date type function, maybe we want to see the percentage of revenue that's coming from weekdays, from weekends. Drag our revenue into our values, and then we can change this calculation so it's the percent of column total. So in just, what was that, 3 clicks maybe, we know that 61% of our revenue comes from weekdays, 38 comes on the weekends. Copy this over. And now maybe we want to see what our top selling products are. So let me go back to no calculation, remove the date type, bring in my product names, and then just filter for the top 10 by revenue. And then let's just sort these in descending order by the sum of revenue. And just like that, we've got our top products. Again, let's maybe format this as currency. And there we go. So Lego bricks is our best seller, followed by collar buds and then magic sand. And maybe let's just do one more pivot table here. And let's see if we can find any trends. So again, I'll remove the product name. Let's bring our date in. And Excel automatically extracts years, quarters, and the months. I don't really need the quarters. Let's expand this. And now we've got our revenue by year and month. So that's how easy it is to analyze data using pivot tables. Now let's just visualize it using charts and graphs all within Excel. So I can do maybe a pie chart for this. Let's do a quick bar chart for our products and a line chart for our trends. And if I copy all of these, let's add them to a little dashboard tab here. Let me put these over here. And let's apply a little bit of formatting to these. So when you create charts from pivot tables, it'll always add these kind of field buttons here. I'm not a huge fan. You can remove those over here. And now let's give these some titles. So call this revenue split. This would be our revenue trend. And then this is our top products. Now it's funny, whenever you create a bar chart in Excel, and I think in a lot of other tools, even though you have it sorted top to bottom, the chart is sorted the other way. No problem. Format the axis, and then just put these in reverse order. Just do a little bit of formatting here. We remove the grid lines, add some data labels, and then maybe we can make these a little bit thicker. Let's remove the total here as well. And maybe let's add some data labels to this too. Put these on the outside. And then to really put the cherry on top, we can go back here and let's add a slicer so that we can filter all of these by product category. It's connected to all of our charts. And now we've got a really nice dynamic dashboard that we put together in what, maybe 10 minutes, all within Excel. We were able to use formulas to create new calculated fields. We were able to use pivot tables to summarize and analyze that data to get insights. And then we were able to use charts and graphs to build this pretty nice dashboard, I think. So now we see that, around 60% of our sales come on weekdays. Well, if we go to electronics, it looks like it's almost 70% on weekdays, which is interesting. We've got a negative revenue trend for our electronics, mostly driven by the color buds. If we go to sports, you'll see that that's more of an even 50-50 split, and we've got kind of 3 best sellers. So yeah, that's Excel in a nutshell for you. I hope this kind of starts to open your eyes to all the possibilities that Excel kind of provides for you as a starting and aspiring data analyst, and how it, lets you get your hands on the raw data, lets you analyze it very easily, and lets you visualize it all within the same interface. So yeah, that's my pitch. Let me stop sharing here. Thanks.
Awesome. So, all right, if everybody's ready to get into SQL, let's cover that next. But actually, maybe before we get in there, we've got a little bit of time. We could do a couple of minutes Q&A on Excel while that's fresh. What questions do folks have? I saw there was VLOOKUP versus XLOOKUP, but we had our fearless leader Chris Dutton jump in and answer that one already. So see if anybody else has anything else. VBA. I know Enrique's got a take on this. Tell them what you think about VBA, Enrique.
Yeah. So my VBA was a very big part of the beginning of my Excel journey, and I think that was the worst thing for the beginning of my Excel journey, because I tried to solve everything using VBA because I thought that would make me an expert, because you're coding. But all it really did was not allow me to learn what I didn't know. So fun fact, I just use the XLOOKUP function now. That's not available on all versions of Excel. I don't know. I think that might have been a question. If not, you can still use VLOOKUP. But I didn't know that Excel had a function that could look up values like that. So I would literally go into VBA and write scripts to do that. And I felt like, the biggest Excel expert in the world would really, I didn't even know some of the basic functionalities in Excel. So my take on VBA is it's definitely not a required skill. I think you need to learn the fundamentals first, which is, again, formulas, pivot tables, and charts. And then if you're strictly needing to use Excel afterwards, and then you need the automation somehow, then maybe learn VBA. And I'd say only even just to accomplish what you need to, maybe even use ChatGPT to help you write the script. But if you really want to get into coding, I think start learning some of the other tools first, right? Because maybe Excel just simply isn't the best solution for the problem that you have. So that's my take on VBA.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was another one I can take quickly on how limited is Excel use on a Mac? Not very. Basically, I'm a Mac user. I use Excel constantly as part of my job. I love it. I would say it's not quite at parity. There are some features that are delayed rolling out on Mac, but just like on a PC, they get better and better over time, and it's not quite parity, but pretty darn close. So if you're a Mac user, don't be afraid to use Excel. It's still incredibly powerful. Let's see what else folks have.
Python integrating in Excel. From my experience, there are a few things that I think are great with the Python integration in Excel. Some things like just unpivoting data. For those of you that don't know what that is, a pivot table will sometimes take a table like this, make it like this, so you can view data in rows and columns. But if that's the way your source data is structured, it's very hard to then create a pivot table from that. So what Python lets you do with Python functions that don't exist in Excel is just unpivot that or melt that. That's what it's called in Python very easily. There are some visualization types that are only available in Python that now you can create in Excel because of Python. A big one is creating scatter plots with different colors for different series. So that's what I've so far been using with Python and Excel that I think I've noticed I couldn't have done in Excel otherwise, at least not very easily.
Awesome. Cool. Well, so for a minute, there were no questions, and then, wow, there's a lot of questions. So I think just in the sake of making sure we cover the SQL portion of this, I know Chris is here in the comments. Enrique, if you want to help out with some of the questions in comments on Excel, I'm going to get started on the SQL portion of this. Guys, amazing questions. I love, keep these coming. And then also, hopefully you're interested in SQL too. So, so here, I'm going to start with why I think everyone should learn SQL if they want a data career. So first off, it is the standard language for relational database management. You're going to find it everywhere. It is maybe not quite as ubiquitous as Excel, but almost every company has a need for SQL. So you'll find it everywhere. You can handle massive data sets using SQL. It's really impressive in terms of what it can handle. Here's the one that I think people are surprised by. It's actually kind of fun to learn. It's intuitive, and it's easier than you would think. I am not by background a data scientist, a computer scientist. I never considered myself a coder. I was an Excel jockey who started to have data sets that were too big to handle in Excel. And this was before the days where Power Query was widespread. So my only choice was to find another tool that could handle these things for my clients. And so I self-taught SQL, but I'm not super technical. When I teach SQL, I teach to that person in mind, somebody who kind of thinks coding is a little scary. And really what you find is it's not. It's an intuitive language that's relatively easy to learn. Companies always need employees who know SQL. The interesting thing, so while SQL's just about as widespread as Excel in companies, because a lot of people are intimidated and think it's a coding language, they're scared to learn, right? So the pool of people who are really good with SQL is actually pretty small. So by learning it, you put yourself on the right side of supply and demand. And so basically the other piece here is you're going to have just never-ending benefits from learning this. There's so many different ways. You can use it as an analyst. You could use it in customer service, in marketing, in operations. Anybody who has access to the SQL database just opens up so many more opportunities for themselves. So let's talk a little bit about some of the common flavors that you'll find of SQL. So there's Oracle and SQL Server. These are really your enterprise solutions. You're not going to use this as an individual on your machine, most likely. Next, we've got MySQL and Postgres. These are interesting ones because there are free implementations that you can use on your own machine, but they're also really, really widespread. There's little differences in the features. SQLite and is another one here that is a little bit less widespread, amazingly easy to install and just get up and running really quick. So the biggest thing that I want you to take away when you see all of these things, and you might get intimidated by, wow, there's so many different versions. They're much more similar than they are different. I tell people they're 95% plus the same. If you learn how to use one of these, you will be able to pick up the next one in like an hour, right? There's going to be very minor syntax differences. The bigger learning curve is understanding what a relational database is, different types of joins, how tables connect, what are the aggregate functions, how do you slice and dice data, that type of stuff. But so once you get your head around that with one of these tools, it's extremely easy to pivot. So for example, I learned on SQL Server at the company that I learned SQL at. After that, I went to a company that didn't use SQL Server, learned MySQL, absolutely no problem being effective on the first day. Went to another company that used MySQL, then to a company that used Postgres, and then to Maven, where we use MySQL internally, and that's also where what we use to teach our courses. So pick one of these. The best answer is always whichever one your company uses if you have access to. The next best answer is probably MySQL or Postgres, because they are both easy to get started with and they're very widely used. Maybe slight edge to MySQL just because it's so widely used. Some people will argue that Postgres has some features that are valuable that MySQL doesn't, and that's probably true. But as somebody who's getting started, I would just go for MySQL because you're going to be able to use it in so many places. So, so next, if I've convinced you to go for MySQL, these are some of the common editors. So MySQL Workbench is the one I would personally recommend the most. It's available on Mac, Windows, and Linux. PHP MyAdmin is actually also a really good one. I've used this before at companies. Heidi SQL is good, but to my knowledge, it's still Windows only. And then SQL Pro, if you're a Mac person and for whatever reason you don't like these other solutions, SQL Pro is a good Mac only solution. I believe it's still Mac only. So first, before we get into any kind of excuse me, I'm getting over something. Before we get into any kind of SQL syntax, I want to just kind of talk about database structure. And this really is where SQL unlocks the power of being able to handle so much data at scale, but still in a relatively efficient and elegant way. So here we've got an illustration of a database that it's got 16 different tables. You can see the dotted lines showing how those different tables relate to each other. And we'll get into that in a little more in a second. And basically, you are able to store all of this data that's distinct and unique into those individual tables, but they also relate to each other. So it's all connected. And that is the amazing power of the relational database. So first, here's an example of a table that we might have in the database, the rental table. It's got a number of columns, rental ID, the rental date. So each record in this table represents when something got rented, and it has all of this information about it. Here's another representation of that. And now you can see the actual data that's in this table and what it looks like. So tables, they're oriented into columns and rows. You can see here, this is an example of a column. This is the primary key of the table. So the important thing about a primary key is it's always unique. You're never going to see a repeating value. This is how you, in a bulletproof way, identify one specific row in the table. And then so each column, each row will represent one specific rental of that data. So for example, here for rental ID 4 that's highlighted, we see when it was rented. We see an ID that's associated with the inventory item. We see an ID that's associated with the customer, when it's due to be returned, the staff member that helped them check it out, and when that record was last updated. So all of that information on that one row is associated with that one specific rental. And every time a rental happens, another piece of data gets dropped into that row. So here, for anybody who's kind of new to SQL, the first thing that I want you to focus on is what we call the big 6 elements of a SQL statement. And we'll walk through a quick demo of this afterwards. But basically, why I think this is the place to go is it's very quick to learn these things. They're very intuitive, and you can see just how quickly you can start pulling data out of a database and actually get some meaningful insights and data out of it. So the first thing that you're going to see all the time is a select statement and a from clause. So basically, the select tells the server which columns you want to pull out, and then the from tells the server which table you want to pull from. And we'll go through some examples in a second. Next, if you want to filter for specific criteria, you only want certain records. So for example, in our rental table previously, if we only wanted records that happened today, then we could impose a logical condition in a where clause that would filter that data just to today's rentals. And that's something we do all the time. Next, we might want to start doing some slicing and dicing. So this is going to be very similar to a pivot table in Excel. You can start to create segmentation with group by, and the syntax there is just group by and then the column that you want to group on. Then if you have a group by, you can also have a having, which is a filter that will apply to your specific groups. So say we wanted to group that rental data by a specific customer. And so we wanted to see how many customers had, which customers had the most rentals. Then we could then filter by customers who have more than 50 rentals, right? So that's a pretty trivial thing to do. And that's done with the having. You're now, instead of filtering out individual rows, you're going to be filtering out groups. And then order by is, think of this as how you're going to sort the result that you pull out. And you can order by one single column name. You can order by multiple column names. So it can get pretty fancy here, but it's all pretty simple. One thing to note here about when you are writing these things, select and from are always required. The others are optional. And then another thing to note about when you're writing these, they always occur in this exact order. And if you write them out of order, like if you tried to have your where condition above your from, you'll get an error and you won't be able to get your results. And with that, I think probably the best way to really get into this is just jump into MySQL Workbench, and we will do a little demo here. So let me pull that up. And I'll pull up a quick demo here for you. So let me get Workbench. And so Workbench, the apologies in advance, the code is going to be a little small on the screen. I've blown it up a little bit. Let me see how it looks when we actually present this, but I think you should be able to see it, but if anybody's on a mobile device, this is going to be a little trickier for you guys. So yeah, so I've got it blown up. Let me see if I can go even a little bit bigger. Yeah, okay. So that's the biggest that MySQL Workbench will let me get it for you. But so let me just kind of walk you through MySQL Workbench. Again, this one is this is the editor that I'd recommend anybody who's just thinking, hey, I want to get started. Go to mysql.com and look for the downloads. The other piece, if you want somebody to walk you through how to do that download in our MySQL courses, any of them, there's a section near the beginning that walks you through how to do that download. It's a free program. You will be using, Chris is helping out in the comments. Thank you, Chris. You'll be using MySQL Workbench as your editor. That's where you're going to interact with the server. And then the server that you'll be running on your own local machine is called Community Server. They're both free platforms. They're both very easy to install. MySQL puts them out so that anybody can use them, and they're really awesome and powerful. So while they're both free for learning, I also use this on the job, and I've used this exact same configuration at other jobs as well. So there's a few areas I want to show you. So here we have the window where we're going to write our queries. You'll see once we run a query, you'll see results pop up down here that called the result grid. And then this is the action output. People are usually focused on the query editor window and then the result grid, but don't neglect the action output. One of the things that you'll find, especially when you're new, it's so easy to have little errors in your syntax. And the action output is going to really help you figure out where those errors are. Eventually, it'll kind of become second nature. Sometimes you won't even need to read the action output, like if you've been doing this for a couple of years. But especially at the beginning, look for the clues in the action output. If you're getting errors, it will tell you things like there's improper syntax and it's near this specific part of the query, and it can really help. So that's one piece to look at. The other piece we have here is the schema window, and you can see in this the schema panel a list of all the tables that you have. So in this case, we have the Maven Fuzzy Factory schema, and we've got a bunch of tables in here. We've got the order item refunds, order items, orders, products, website page views, and website sessions. So let's just do a quick, orders is a good table to work with. I think that'll be the one that's pretty easy for everybody to understand. So in this table, every item here represents an order that a customer placed with this business. So again, the primary key here, it's usually the first column in the table. That's not a specific rule, but it is a very common convention. You'll mostly see the primary key here, and most of the time, the primary key is what we call an auto incrementing integer. So the first record is 1, second is 2, 3, etc. Again, these are not rules. There are other ways to do primary keys, but this is by far the best way to do it. And so as a result, you almost see it always there. Most tables you'll see will also have a created at timestamp. And so this is formatted as a date time here with years, months, days, and then hours, minutes, second. It's when a data point gets put in there, it stamps the current time. That can be really helpful as an analyst. We're going to use that date time value to do all of this slicing and dicing and trending analysis. So really, really useful. And then here we've got a couple of other website session ID and user ID, and those are going to link out to other tables in the database. In this, this is just a practice database we built. There's actually no user table, but there is a website session table, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then they've got the product that somebody purchased, the number of items that they purchased, how much they spent in USD, and the cost of goods sold in USD. So here, the select statement that we have is just a very simple select star, and star means select all columns. If instead we wanted to we wanted to just pull back a certain number of columns here. Let me try to get this a little bit. I'm gonna balance having big text and also being able to give you a decent query to work with. So we'll have order ID, we'll have price USD, and that's probably plenty to just show you. So here now we're pulling out only 2 columns, order ID and price USD, and you see here we separate them with a comma, and this the formatting that I have here, it's really optional, but it's also pretty common, pretty commonly seen. So usually I will capitalize the keywords here like select, but you'll see if I write it as lowercase, it doesn't matter. It's just sort of about beautification of the script. It helps you when you start to get complicated queries. Having capitalized keywords can help you. Having indentation to show the column names versus the keywords is also a pretty common practice. It's not correct or wrong to do it another way. I'll show you. Basically, you could write this all on one line, and it'll return the exact same result. So next, let's do some other stuff here. So let's include a where condition. So let's say where price USD is less than, so see all these ones here at the beginning of the database, the price USD is $49.99. I'm going to say where it's less than $49. And so now it's going to cut out all of those that are $49.99 and also anything else that's above $49. So now we see there's some of these other products that weren't showing up before that are cheaper. And so next, I want to bring in a little bit more data here that I can show you, and I'll show you another thing that you can do. So we're working on the orders table. If you ever are curious what columns are in that orders table, Workbench makes it really easy to just pop in here, grab a list of the columns. So I actually, in my head, I was just thinking, I want to bring in the product ID, and I thought it was called primary product ID, but I wasn't sure. It might also be called just product ID. But so this is a good way to kind of just gut check what's in each of those columns. And so I'm going to type in primary product ID. make sure I have that that comma here. And actually, let me show you what it looks like if I forgot to put that column in first, so you guys can see. And I am not getting an error here, which is that's very very surprising to me that there's no error there. There should be an error there. There must be some setting or some kind of an issue with this workbench error. But basically, if you don't have this column here, you should be getting an error. I've literally never seen that happen before. I'm going to look into that after this. But so now we have the primary product ID, so you can see that. And so here's an example of similar to a pivot table. So we've already shown you select from and where. Let's use group by, and instead of just pulling all the data as individual records, I'm now going to create some segmentation, and I'm going to summarize that data, and we'll see how that works. So I'm going to say group the data by primary product ID, and I'm going to include some aggregate functions. I'm going to count the number of orders, order ID values and I'll call that number of orders. And then I'm going to sum the price USD, and I'll call that total revenue. And so one thing to call out here is putting the as and then this other column name here. This is optional. We don't actually have to do it. This is called assigning an alias. And the reason I do it is just because it makes it really clear in the output what we're trying to do with that column. So now you can see that, and you'll see by primary product, the total number of orders for each one. So we have about 2,000 orders for product 3, and we have 500 orders for product 4. We've got this filter here with the where condition. So let's check out some of the other products here. To do that, we can either delete the where condition, or we can add 2 dashes and a space, and see how this turned blue here. This is called now commented out. So now the server will skip over this where condition, everything that's on this line, because it's now commented out. And so now, instead of just returning 3 and 4, we also find the number of orders and the total revenue for primary product 1 and primary product 2. And then so finally, we've got all of this this data here. It's already actually kind of nicely ordered the way that it is. But let's say it for some reason we wanted to order it with the smallest number of orders at the top. We can do order by count of order ID, and what's implied here is that it's going to be in ascending order, and I'll show you that again. Basically, if you don't type ascending, the ordering is implied there. So watch, I'll comment this out, and it'll return the same result here with the smallest number of orders here at the top. So that's a quick overview of the big 6. We didn't do halving. We could do halving here as well. So let's do halving, and let's say halving count of order ID greater than 2,000. And so now we skipped primary product ID 4 because it didn't have enough orders, so it doesn't get included in the results here. So this is the big 6. I would say for anybody who's looking to get started, this is the best place to do it. Some folks sometimes tell me, hey, you want to start with building the database, figuring out like how to create a schema, create a table. Personally, I think that's the wrong approach. I think starting with a database that already exists and then just learning how to extract that data, it's so easy, and you can just very quickly start to feel the power of SQL. So I think that's the best way to get the momentum. Absolutely, you should learn about how to build tables, build schemas, but on day one, this is where you go. You go with the big 6. You learn how to do select from a certain table, play with specific columns, filter them with the where condition, group by, use some of these aggregate functions like count and sum. You could use average, min, and max. And this is the way to build momentum. After that, start to learn how 2 tables join together, learn the difference between an inner join and a left join. But on day 1, this is where you want to be. So that's that's our quick SQL lesson. I would love to just kind of jump back in here to the questions. I've been neglecting the comments, trying to focus on the demo, but would love to answer folks' questions right now. Let's see. Mohammed, yes, there is an autocomplete feature both in MySQL Workbench and other platforms as well. Will have they all have varying versions of autocomplete. There, I forget if MySQL's is called in IntelliSense or if that's the Microsoft one, but they have different versions. If you just Google like MySQL autocomplete, you'll find it. I personally haven't been a user of autocomplete for a while. I like it off, but it can be really useful. Let's see. Esther had a question, understanding how group by works in Postgres. Exactly the same way. So actually everything that that we put on this screen here in MySQL Workbench, all of the syntax works exactly the same in Postgres. So so that's an example of like nothing would be different. If you have Postgres at work and you have access, you could put this exact query in and it'll work the same way. Well, actually, you would need the database, but if you had the database, this specific database, but you could use other tables and other columns with kind of the same logic here. Saraswati, good question about, oh, actually, yeah, Chris already answered that one. But yeah, the answer is depends. And again, and I think Chris nailed it. Do you want to modify your data to clean it in SQL or in Power BI? The answer is usually as close to the source as possible, so that you're kind of doing it once, and then any kind of reporting that's built off of it, it's already done. But you know, there's a number of different ways to skin it, but I think that's a great question. Let's see. Yeah, comments. Good question here about comments. So when you, in this example, didn't really matter. We could have deleted it. We could have commented. Where comments become like really, really valuable is you start to do kind of more complex stuff. You start to have a query that you write today and you might need like a month from now. And you're going to have some logic in there. And you realize that a month from now, I might say, hey, why did I filter out those values? You know, I put in a where condition that said, you know, where ID is not 5. Like, okay, why did I filter out 5 from that? You know, because maybe in the moment you're doing this analysis and you realize like there's some problem with product number 5. You might not know that later. So that's, I think, the biggest reason to use comments, because otherwise you could just delete it. Is leaving a message for your future self or somebody else who might be picking up your code. It can be really, really helpful to have well-commented code. The other reason is if you want to easily be able to toggle the query. So like in here, say I have this query and I want to run it with the filter and without the filter. It's super easy to basically just add that filter back in by deleting it. So those are the 2 biggest reasons that I use comments. Or sometimes actually, if you're working on a heavy query and there's a piece that you're not sure about yet, you can comment like a whole section out entirely. So for example, the other way we could do it is we can comment out a multi-line comment, which we open it with a slash and a star, and then we close it with a star and a slash. So that instead of a single line comment with 2 dashes, we can then comment out a huge block of code. And I'll do that all the time if I'm working on something complicated. So yeah, great questions there on comments. Let me try to get back down here. Yeah, Rumathi, how do you get more practice with group by common errors? You get tripped up by the selected columns that are not in the group by. Okay, yeah. So this, let me just show you what that one is. So, so let me answer that one, because that does trip a lot of people off. So I'm glad that you have mentioned this. So let me drop this down a tiny bit so you guys can see it, and then I'll ditch these. So we're really just focus here. So, okay. So in our select statement, let me run it so you can actually see the real output of it. So it's pulling in all of these. So we've got one column here that's what's called a non-aggregated column. All we're doing here is just naming that column. There's no aggregate function on it. And then the other two columns we're creating, we have two aggregate functions. Okay, so we have three total columns. One is a non-aggregated one. One is, two of them are aggregate functions. And so the non-aggregated column, if you're going to use aggregate functions and a group by, all of your non-aggregated columns have to appear here in the select. So, and again, this is actually one that there's a setting in MySQL where you can have it ignore this error. And I hate that it even exists, because in the other platforms, that setting doesn't exist. So your query would totally fail. So, but for example, so this runs fine, but let's say I put in order ID. We get an error here, and that error says, and I'll copy that error code up here if I can. Let's see, copy response. I'll just copy the whole thing here. And so the error code is, it said, select list is not in group by clause and contains non-aggregated columns. So basically this order by has created this problem here. And the way that we could do it is we could add it here. And so now we're also grouping by order ID. The challenge here is that's like a grouping that doesn't add a lot of value, because the data was already at the order ID level. But you can just see that what you need to do is, for any of your non-aggregated columns, you have to include them all in the group by, or else you're going to have a problem. Yeah, the Jargana. So after you write the code, what's the next step? So there's tons of ways that you can do this, different workflows. One of them is connecting it with Power BI or Tableau. So that's like a really powerful 1-2 tool set. I don't even actually do that personally. I'm usually using SQL and Excel. So for me, those are my favorite tools. So I'm getting data from SQL. I'm probably dropping it into Excel to do the visualization and the storytelling. But there's a ton of different ways that you can do it. Yeah, ChatGPT, David, can be useful. Sometimes, it's hit or miss. Check out, we have a ChatGPT course that everybody can see. It's free. And I would definitely recommend checking that out. Yeah, CTEs and Windows functions. So we're almost out of time, but let me see if I can quickly just give you a link to a blog post that we have on CTEs and Windows functions, because I think that'll be pretty useful. 1 second, make sure that I can find this here. All right, so on our blog, learn.
John, I don't know if everyone can hear me, but I can't hear you either. I don't think folks can. Still nothing.
All right.
There you go.
How about now? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think something was up with my mic. All right, everybody. So sorry about that. If I just went no sound, hopefully not too long. But yeah, folks, we're actually about at time. We're going to get to another session in about 3 minutes with our amazing Power BI instructor, Aaron Perry. So hopefully folks will come over to that one. Quick one, Elke, Excel or SQL first. I'm the SQL guy, and I'm telling you Excel first. It is the quickest, least intimidating way. You can get in, you can start to manipulate data. You can do pivot tables, you can do charts and graphs. Always Excel first. And then I would advocate that your second tool be SQL. A little bit biased. Some would say Power BI. I think either of those two is a great choice, though. So yeah, and let me get that link for the next event. I could do that real quick. So here, there you go. Try that link. You should be able to get in there. Aaron and I will be back in there in about a minute. Just going to go run up and grab a drink of water, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.